Welcome to the Foreman Coaching Channel, where we talk about being a foreman in the construction industry and make you a bomb foreman. Maybe open your eyes to some things you didn't know before, maybe show you some things that you didn't know before, help you improve the way it goes. I was reading in the news a couple weeks ago that the CEO of Airbnb, I got some notes over here I'm reading from now. The CEO of Airbnb says that he's going to allow his employees to permanently work remotely. And he said, quote, "If the office didn't exist, I would like to ask, would we invent it? And if we invented it, what would it be invented for?" I think it's an interesting question. You know, if you can do the same job remotely for Airbnb, I'm going to draw some comparisons here, so bear with me. If you can do the same thing working in an office as you could from home, then you should reasonably question, what value are you bringing by having an office? And I'm sure they're doing the introspection on that right now. You know, I'm not saying there isn't any value, but I'm saying it's a smart question to ask. They're going to be, if you had to rebuild the office right now, how would you build it? You know, knowing that people can work from home, and in the case of Airbnb, they are actually more productive working from home than in an office. So you might ask yourself, well, why is that? What is it about an office that's actually hindering production versus working at home? You know, and I'm not, this video isn't to go down that rabbit hole. I'm just saying it's a smart stop and introspect. And what he's doing there is, this is the question he's asking. Are we doing things because it's always the way it's been done? Or maybe we should ask, is there, has the ground shifted beneath us? Does that just not make sense anymore? And should we be doing things a different way? And I think that pertains exactly to the construction industry. I mean, really strongly to the construction industry. The whole question about, are we doing things because that's the way it's always been done? You know, and to figure out, is there a better way to be doing things? You need to ask yourself that question, you know. And not asking that question is being ignorant to the situation that construction is totally different today than it was, 100 years ago. But the mindsets of the people haven't changed much. There's still a lot of people that, because of lack of training in the industry, there's just not a lot of channels like Foreman Coaching Channel out there telling people how you could be doing things. You just figure that doing things the way we've always done it is the right way to do it. So one thing I want to draw a comparison to about how Airbnb CEO, he reflects on his own company. Maybe we should be asking some of the same questions in the construction industry. I wanted to take a little walk down how a job manifests itself and maybe put that lens on that process and say, are we as not as foremen, but as like the construction industry, the owners, the engineers, the architects, are they doing stuff in a way that makes sense, or are they doing stuff just the way it's always been done, but maybe it ain't the best way of going about doing it? Because as a foreman, I got to tell you, when you receive the drawings and you start going through the drawings and you start finding all the errors and missing information and all that kind of stuff, you really don't know all that stuff that happened before the drawings were made and they get dropped on your desk, right? And a lot happens before then, a lot. I mean, and by the time the drawings hit your desk and it's time for you to go build the job, there is a ton of like expectations and thought processes that are baked into that drawing set that you stumble upon rather than knowing ahead of time usually as you go through the drawing. So what do I mean? What are we talking about? Okay, so let's talk about step by step. Let's break down how a job manifests in the first place. So I like to use Starbucks as an example. And I got some notes here. I'm going to scroll through my notes as we're going along here. Okay, so let's say an owner is somebody with money wants to build another Starbucks. He's going to add another franchise Starbucks to downtown ABC town. And, he's got the money, but he's not an architect. He doesn't know what he's doing. So he contracts with an architectural firm in order to create drawings so he can get all the permits and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times at that point in the project, it's just an idea. Somebody's got money. Maybe several different consulting firms go after this guy and submit bids to him. Hey, we'll create drawings for, $200,000, $300,000, whatever it is. I'm picking numbers out of thin air. I don't know if that's how much it costs to build a Starbucks. And so all of these consultants are promising the owner, all the deliverables, they call it, the drawing set, the electrical drawings, the plumbing drawings, the mechanical drawings, and, a level of completeness. Now, checkpoint. At that point, the owner, he's got the money. What's he looking for? Or she, he or she is looking for a consultant that is going to build the project with no hassles for the price point offered. Keep that in mind as we go down the path. So let's say consultant wins the project, gets 25% of the money up front, consultant goes to work drawing. Now, consultants, architects, they're kind of under the same house. Usually consultants have architects in-house. What I mean by in-house, they're in the office. They usually don't cover all the disciplines. So a consultant who is going to do the drawings for the owner might only have one discipline under their own house. Okay, this is very important. It's very important what I'm telling you here. And usually it's just the architectural. So what that means is the consultant needs to now go out and hire an electrical engineer, a plumbing engineer, a mechanical engineer, and so on. So they will turn around and solicit bids from electrical design engineers, mechanical design engineers, whatever they don't have in-house. And that takes some time. Now, the consultant has probably promised the owner drawings by a certain date. So this is kind of, the clock's ticking as this goes along. So the consultant, he gets bids from the various electrical designers, mechanical designers, plumbing designers, everything. And they go to town and they start making their drawings. So the architect's making their drawings. Here's this electrical subcontractor designer making their drawings. And they start turning in the drawings. There comes a point in time, a month down the road, whatever it is, that the consultant starts receiving the drawings from the mechanical, from the electrical, from the plumbing. And he's going to put all these drawings or sheet together, put them in a big bundle, and call it Starbucks drawings. And they're going to show them to the owner, and then they're going to get contractors hired. So they get they start flipping through the drawings, and they might notice things. Hey, here's a coffee grinder that the kitchen equipment supplier put on the counter in the drawings, but the electrical didn't pick it up and put a receptacle there. So depending on how far along it is in the process, maybe the consultant sends it back to the electrical designer and says, hey, you missed this thing, you need to roll it in. So there starts to be a give and take. That's called coordinating the drawings. Keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. The consultant is supposed to be coordinating the drawings. Now, some of you might have a lot to say right then and there. Don't worry, we'll get there. Okay, so the consultant, they receive the drawings and they look at the electrical and they look at the mechanical, and the mechanical has a HVAC unit on the roof, but the electrical, let's not keep picking on the electrical. Let's say the plumbing didn't plan on some cooling lines up to the HVAC. So the consultant has to tell the plumber, hey, you need to add cooling lines. Well, what'll happen is, just like a regular job, when it gets to the construction site, the consultant starts to run out of time. The deliverable, the final drawing set, is due to the owner, and the consultant doesn't like to miss their deadlines, so very often, through a combination of reasons, whether they just didn't do a good enough job cross-referencing and coordinating the drawings, or they figure they're out of time, they'll just figure it out in the field. They send those drawings off to the owner. What am I saying here? I am saying that the drawings inherently always have baked into them conflicting and missing information. Always. Should never say always, but I've never seen a drawing set that didn't. If you have, let me know. there are always missing or conflicting information. So what's interesting is at this stage, no subcontractors are solicited to bid on the project or anything like that. It's just the consultant and the owner. And at this stage, the consultant typically already knows that there's probably lots of errors in the drawings. So they put magic things in their specifications. So the specifications, nicknamed maybe the project manual, the spec. What I'm trying to say is the specs are a design manual. They're a book that comes along with the drawings that provide more information and clarifying information. They actually technically supersede the drawings. They're the instruction set on how to build the thing that's in the drawings. What the consultants will do is they'll put in the specifications where conflicts occur, or I should say, it's the contractor's responsibility to identify conflicts. It's the contractor's responsibility to identify conflicts. Well, why would there be any conflicts? Why would there be any conflicts? Didn't the owner just pay a ton of money to you to create a drawing set? Why would there be conflicts? I mean, I can understand if you overlooked a small thing here and there, but that is, I mean, as foreman, if you're not a foreman, guess what? You're going to find this out. It is not typically the case that there is just a few. Why would you put it right in the specs that it's the contractor's responsibility to identify conflicts? Because here's the problem with that statement. Here's what you do. When I'm a foreman and let's say there's electrical missing to the blender on the Starbucks counter. It was never in the electrical drawings. And the general contractor says, well, look, it's in the specs. The contractor is supposed to coordinate the drawings. You can always say, I assumed the blender was wrong. Well, I mean, the electrical designer has a state of Washington stamp. He's a smart guy. And he didn't put electrical there on purpose. So I figured the blender guy putting the blender there was the mistake. I mean, as a contractor, how are you to know which one is the mistake? Yet, there it is in the specs. Contractor is to coordinate the drawings. So here's the cool thing. Because, well, it's not cool. It's insidious. What they'll do, what consultants will do in the specs to resolve the whole idea of, how's the contractor supposed to know? I wasn't in the meeting between the owner and the consultant. Does the blender go there or not? I don't know. It's not on the electrical drawings. It is on the equipment drawings. Why would I just assume that the equipment drawings are correct? Why wouldn't I assume the electrical drawings are correct and the equipment guys got it wrong? Saying that it's the contractor's responsibility to coordinate the drawings creates this snafu because the contractor doesn't know the owner's intent. I don't know if there's supposed to be a blender there or not. So they resolve this one by putting in the specs where there is a conflict, the contractor should assume whatever costs more is the correct answer. Whatever costs more is the correct answer. How about that? How about that? Now, that is an interesting statement. Why would you put that in the specs? Why would you put that in the specs unless you know you make a lot of mistakes and you need to cover your ass? I call those toilet paper clauses because engineers wipe their butt with these clauses when they poop themselves. And I'm not going to make any friends with engineers, but it's obvious why these clauses exist. They wouldn't need to exist if the drawings were correct in the first place, right? So, I mean, I know I'm not making any friends in the engineering community, but here's the point. We go back to the Airbnb saying, if we hadn't never invented offices, would we invent them now and why? And he's not saying don't invent offices. He's saying if you're going to invent offices, think about what the use case is. People that want to come into the office, they want to work in a communal around other people. Maybe there's collaboration going on, and maybe it doesn't need to happen every day. So when you design an office, you design it lending itself to that, so you get maximum function out of the dollars that you're spending on the office. If I was to talk to an owner, the guy that's funding the Starbucks, and explain to him that, look, the consultant, like whenever they just screw up, what they do is they put this clause in the specs that puts the onus on the contractor. And wouldn't you want all those things resolved prior to handing it off to the contractor? Because the only reason those clauses exist is to cover errors that are done by the consulting firm. They're covering errors and omissions, okay, which is a type of insurance they have to carry. So it's almost like if I had a car and I had to buy insurance, and I could put my own clause in there, but if I ever get in a little fender bender, it doesn't count. Having that be legit. That's what these clauses are in the specifications. They're saying, well, if I didn't get it quite right, that's okay. The contractor's going to have to take the hit on that. So when these drawings are all done, they're going to go out to bid. Okay, this is the next step in the process. So the owner, he's not an architect and an engineer. He's not a plumber. He's not seeing all these errors. And even if he or she did, I don't know if they would change anything. The next step is to get bids to do the job. So these drawings go out to bid. Let's say 5 different general contractors look at this job. And it's the same thing as the consultants. Most of the time, the general contractors don't have all the disciplines under their own house: the electrical, the plumbing, the mechanical. So a general contractor who's going to submit a price to build this Starbucks is going to reach out to these houses and reach out to more subcontractors, electrical, mechanical, and so on, to get pricing. So the general contractor, the electrical supply houses, the plumbers, they're all looking at these drawings. They may or may not identify all the conflicts that are baked into the drawings, because typically an electrician is going to look at the electrical drawings. Now, the specifications are going to hold them to this higher standard that wherever a conflict exists, they have to acknowledge the higher cost of however to resolve the conflict. Those kind of things generally do not get caught at the bid phase. I'm telling you right now, most of the time, these kind of things are not caught. A lot of times there's even extra work in the specs that aren't on the drawings. So all these mistakes cause confusion. Now, let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something here right now that's really important on how you can judge how good a drawing set is. When those bids come back, the engineers get a grade right there, in my opinion. Okay? This is what it is. If the bids come back in a pretty narrow range, let's say it's $750,000 to build this Starbucks. Somehow we magically know the actual real price. Let's imagine that. And let's say of the 5 contractors, they're all peppered right around that cost, plus or minus 1 or 2%. That's a good drawing set. Okay? You know why? How you can tell is not a lot was left open to interpretation. Okay? It's not these contractors that are bidding on the job. It's not their job to be creative. They should just be bidding on what needs to be built, and what needs to be built should be very clear in the drawings. If what needs to be built is clear in the drawings, then the bid results should be very tight. Okay? Because the idea that company ABC can edge out company XYZ because they're just a lot better at doing excavation, that may very well be true. Typically, it's not like a 50% margin though. When one company's better than another company, it's usually just by a very slim margin. So when the drawings are not very clear, you get a really wide spread because the drawings have left it open to interpretation. And I'm telling you, if you're watching this video, you're probably part of the contractor world, and you know very well not everybody out there has an IQ 200, okay? No offense to anybody. I don't have an IQ 200, but point is, there's going to be a lot of people out there that just assume the easiest, simplest, most direct things, and they're probably going to miss a couple things too, and they're probably going to come in 50% of what the high level bid is. So when the drawings are not clearly articulating the work, you get a really wide spread in the price, okay? That's how you grade how good the drawings are. Which one is in the interest of the owner? This is not a trick question. I mean, you might think, okay, well, if you have a really wide spread between the low and the high, then you might have some really low prices to work with. That's good for the owner, but that is a train wreck waiting to happen. That's what that is. That is lawsuits, companies going bankrupt. Like, no. What you want is your build, your drawings, cleanly and clearly articulated for that tight spread. So you know that is confirmation that the contractors understood the project when the bid comes back in a tight spread. Let me tell you something. I recently bid a project up at a university, and it was for some access controls. And as an electrical contractor, you guys probably know this, the drawings are typically called schematical, which means the engineers draw the receptacle and they draw the panel, but they don't draw all the pipe in between. Well, what are electricians doing all day, every day? Most of the time, they're running the pipe in between. Okay, so this particular job, there was several buildings, several multi-floor buildings, and we had to get from a panel to, the device on the far end. But the pipe isn't shown between. So because engineers don't show pipe, you left it up to me to decide how to penetrate through like 6 floors, 50 times, and then branch out to. So in other words, the bulk of the work that I was going to do is actually not shown on the drawings, okay? So is that a clear description of the work? Well, I'll tell you, my bid was $2.6 million, and the low bid was like $1.6 million. So I got smoked at the bid table, number one. But I tell you, I sent a message to the owner that asked for the bid, and I told him, hey, I don't want you to think that my bid was just a throwaway. That, the way I've worked for your facility, the way I imagined having to core through all the floors and run all the conduits from the basement to the 8th floor and 7th floor, 6th floor, 5th floor, and then branching all, none of that work is shown on the drawings. So linear footage and all that stuff, amount of wire I'm going to need, was all up to me. So somebody took their wild guess at it and evidently came in well below me. And I just, I wanted him to know that it wasn't a throwaway bid. So, the throwaway bid meaning I didn't even want the job. I'm just throwing a high number out there because I want to keep getting invited to the table. And so anyway, that's an example of the work not being shown on the drawings, resulting in this really wide bid spread. So what's in the interest of the owner? I mean, clearly well-defined drawings. Why aren't well-defined, articulate, detailed drawings an industry standard? Okay, let's put a pin in that question and we'll circle back around to it. So let's say, let's get back to our how the project comes to life. The drawings are handed out. A bunch of subcontractors bid on the drawings. The owner and the consultant say, hey, congratulations, company 123, you're the low bidder, you get the job. Now, a lot of times, once that low bidder gets the job and a contract is signed, whole nother video on contract language that'll get you, part of what they have to do is they have to BIM model the drawings. Here's the great irony. So BIM modeling, if you don't know what BIM modeling is, it is a 3D drawing of the building, and what happens is it's kind of like all the different trades, the architectural or the structural, the mechanical, the engineers, they build the thing in a metaverse, kind of basically. And they draw it in 3D, and they look for where they clash. They call it clash detecting. Oops, the structural guy put a big beam where the HVAC guy has an HVAC unit. That can't exist in reality. We better fix that, So that's what that is. So I think that whole exercise is very interesting because, think about it. Okay, the consultant already drew everything and already clash detected everything. Like, why would, after the contractor wins it, why would you ask them to redraw everything again and look for what the consultant did wrong? It's comical. Like, okay, if you think Ford factory designs a new car, and then the engineers, once they're done designing a new car, they send it down to the mechanics on the floor and they say, hey guys, while you're building this, why don't you check if the engine actually fits in the engine compartment? I might have accidentally put the driveline in the trunk where it won't work, Should probably look for that. But if I did make an error, it's up to you to fix it, It's comical. See, the clear, obvious, correct way to do this, if you were the Airbnb CEO and you said, why don't we do this a different way, would be to have the engineers BIM model it in the beginning. And if you did, so here's another thing. So if the engineers drew it in 3D from the beginning and clash detected their own stuff and coordinated their own stuff, instead of asking contractors to do it, who are not, generally speaking, who are not really adept at design and all that kind of stuff, then the contractors would get better, tighter information in order to submit their bids, right? So let's imagine this world. I've asked engineers, why don't they do this? If you're drawing, electrical engineer, if you're drawing the electrical drawings and you know exactly how many lights there are, receptacles, how many linear feet of pipe potentially even, why wouldn't you just pass that bill of materials over to the subcontractors and say, hey, there's 100 lights, just give them a rundown of the material, because that would make the bidding process really clean. It would tighten up the width of the bid discrepancy. You'd have a really tight bid field, which means a clear understanding of the drawings. And I've asked engineers, why wouldn't they do that? And you know what they say? I've asked 3 times, 3 different engineers, and they say, that's too much responsibility. It's too much responsibility. The responsibility that the owner thinks that they have when they contracted with them, though, right? I find it hard to believe that the owner would have contracted to a consultant firm, and the consultant's firm's pitch was, we're going to draw it to like 50%. It's going to be full of errors, but we're going to make statements in the specs that makes it so the contractor has to build it anyway. Sweet, right? I don't think that is what the owner thinks is going on, and I don't think that's what should go on. The other comment I get from engineers is, well, that would be really expensive for the engineers. Really? Because it's really expensive when you don't do that, and you ask the contractors to do that, and then even if that process doesn't go well, or maybe they don't pay for that process, you run into actual errors during the course of the project. And then it's really expensive to fix it at that point, when you actually install the beam where the HVAC unit goes and everything. So anyway, okay, so we've tracked the path of how a job comes into... the foreman's not even on the job yet, and there's been all this comedy already, right, of how this process works its way down the line. This process, when a electrical contractor finally gets a contract from a GC based on the drawings that came from the consultant and everything, and the subcontractor says, we got a job, man, and calls the foreman on the phone and slaps those prints on your table. So much happened before you got those drawings. Most foremen do not realize the craziness that happened before those drawings landed on the table. When you start flipping through the drawings and you start finding all those errors, it's maddening. It drives you nuts. It slows down the process. I say as an electrical contractor all the time, we get put in these situations where we're supposed to be solving problems that were caused upstream of us. I can't imagine that the owner thought that, Jeremy Abbott, the journeyman wireman out in the field was going to be fixing all the problems that were caused by engineer on day one when he contracted with that consulting firm. I'd love to be in the pitch between the consulting firm and the engineer, with the consulting firm going, don't worry, we're just going to have the foreman in the field solve everything when we just shove all this stuff downstream. And I know the consultant firms, they're fighting each other for low price too. This video really just totally annihilated engineers, didn't it? But as a foreman, I guess that's the thought you get about engineers, is like, I know that's how projects get birthed. And so when I'm on a job and I see all these problems, the next thing that happens is you start asking questions, right? RFIs in the field. Well, the coffee maker or the blender doesn't have any electrical. Am I supposed to bring it there? And the engineer gets defensive. This is the interesting part. This is how you actually know it was never part of the plan for them to have you solve everything in a way, is the engineers will start getting defensive about their drawings. And they'll tell, well, that's in the spec section, that you're supposed to resolve all conflict in the drawings, And the engineers will say, oh, you're supposed to be designing per the NEC, or you're supposed to be installing per the code. Okay, no, you're not. No, you're not. When the engineer tells you that, that is not a thing. That is not a thing. They love to tell you that. The NEC code itself says that it is not supposed to be a design manual. I had an engineer get upset with me one time, and he stood up in the middle of a meeting and, you're supposed to be installing per the NEC. No, I'm not. You're supposed to be designing per the NEC. You're supposed to design it per the NEC. He says, well, you'll fail inspection. And I said, well, I like to phrase it, your design will fail inspection. And he says, well, you're supposed to be checking. Is number 10 sufficient? That is a rabbit hole. Are you kidding me? That is not real. I'm not supposed to be doing that. If I do that and I see you got something wrong, you're lucky. I saved you. That's what you got right there. But it's not my responsibility. Am I supposed to run all the calcs on the loads in the panel board and resize all the breakers? Should I be double checking the AIC is correct coming from the fault current from the PUD? Did you miss any branch circuit? At what point are we saying that I'm just the engineer, right? When the engineer does stuff like that, they're shirking the responsibility that they're supposed to have. And it's chronic in this industry. And what's terrible is, as a foreman, there's not really any regular chronic's a stupid word for that. There's not any good, regular, solid training that foremen get, right? We know how foremen can become foremen. Farm system. An existing foreman says, hey, apprentice, you seem like you're a go-getter. Let's challenge you with some foreman skills, and he takes you under the wing. And that's how the whole foreman system works right now, and that is all going to change very soon. But, the point is, though, these foremen, nobody's training you, nobody's teaching you that these aren't your responsibilities. So you get in these meetings and you're around engineers and owners, and these guys, they got college degrees, and they talk like they're really smart and they're really aggressive when they talk to you, and you start buying in. I don't know, maybe it is my job to double check all the calculations that the engineer made. Shoot, man. And you're talking to your shop, whoa, boy, we better check all the wire sizes, and we were overfill on that conduit. No. You should not have to be doing all that stuff, especially the foreman in the field. Sometimes, I'm actually sitting on a municipal job. I won't throw it under the bus and say which one it is. In the specifications, it actually says that the contractor is to install per the design intent. How do you like that? Per the design intent. So when my company signs that contract, we're agreeing to install per what the engineer meant to install. So at any point, the engineer could say, wow, yeah, you're right, I got that wrong. But you understand you're supposed to install per design intent, and I meant to draw this other thing, so you're going to have to install that now per specification section, right? Why would they have a phrase in there like that? Number one, that phrase basically negates the validity of the entire drawing set, right? What's the point in a drawing set if I'm supposed to install per the engineer's intent? At what point does that mean we just sit down at a table and I say, engineer, what did you mean to install? I better double check everything for you. Anyway, now I'm just starting to riff. I need to start kind of wrapping this up and closing it up. Point being here is, the Airbnb CEO, he looked back on how he was doing things and he said, is there room for improvement in this day and age where we have enough technology and that employees can work from home? And in the case of Airbnb, the quality of life is higher, it doesn't sacrifice productivity, so why wouldn't we do something differently? And so I am trying to point out inefficiencies in the construction system, okay? So when I'm throwing engineers under the bus, it might sound like I'm just, puking vinegar here and being mean, but I'm trying to point out opportunity for improvement. Here is my suggested improvement, okay? My suggested improvement, is that engineers do full designs. I don't care if it's in 3D or not, but the responsibility for coordination stay with the engineers, okay? Because those errors, when they get passed down, when the consultant submits those drawings with errors in them to meet some deadline that happened way before we start the job, when those errors manifest on the job, they delay the job, they cost a ton of money. You're not helping anything. I want there to be a study. I would love Electri to take on this study, okay? And the study would be this. I'd like to study the bid field. Remember I talked about how you can grade how good the drawings are by how tight the bid field is. I want to see a study that when the bid field, that maybe this is how I'd phrase it. Measure the width of the bid field, like how far apart in percentage from the low to the high, the low bid to the high bid, how far apart is the bid field? And then how much money in change orders were there? Okay, because both those things speak to the quality of the drawings, right? If you're on a job, typically speaking, there might be exceptions, but typically speaking, every change order is a comment on the accuracy of the drawings, and engineers know that. That's why they hate change orders. If a job has 500 change orders on it, clearly the engineering got something wrong. And I'll bet money that if you went back and on a job with 500 change orders, if you went back and you looked at the bid field spread, the bid field spread was wide, okay? Why would you want to do a measurement like that? Because it's an indicator. It's a key point indicator. It's a way we can improve our industry, okay? Wrapping this all up in a bow and trying to finish up this video now. This is my point. If you could have a stop point that when jobs went out to bid, you saw the bid field was too wide, maybe you don't just award the low and ship that off. Maybe you pause. Maybe you send the low bidder a notice of intent to award them or whatever, so you don't completely screw up the existing process. But take steps towards stop. Why is there such a wide spread? Because the likelihood that the low is going to go into the job and try to annihilate you with change orders and end up at the price of the high bidder anyway is very high. I don't know that to be a fact because I haven't done the research on that. It just seems obvious to me. And I'd love Electri to do a study of, maybe public bids and then see if you could work with the contractors to disclose some numbers to improve our industry and get some vision on what's going on in the engineering field right now. People that are taking on engineering and consulting contracts with owners that are funding projects, we need to improve the quality of the documents that are flowing out of those guys to the construction field. I'm telling you, I've been doing this about 20 years, and the quality of the documents, but the responsibility of the contractors and the foreman in the field, so you see what's happening is all they're doing is they're offloading the responsibilities onto you. So circling all around, what does this have to do with being a foreman? Well, all that stuff happens before you even get the drawings. And so what I'm trying to say is a lot of things that happen on a job aren't your doing, okay? And it can be overwhelming as a foreman sometimes, keeping up with everything that's going wrong on a job. If the crap's hitting the fan at 100 miles an hour at certain points in the job, it may not be your fault. It has to do with things that happened upstream of you, and I think we should make big changes in the industry. All right, so if you think I'm full of crap, you want to send me some hate mail, drop some comments down in the video below. And appreciate you guys hanging out and watching this video. The secret word for this video is dog scratching on the door. If you type dog scratching on the door in the comments below, because that's what he's doing right now, you made it to the end of this video, and I got something special for you. All right, talk to you guys later.